Very good evening to all of you.
Good
And also,
evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So basically, I hope everyone is safe and doing well. Let me quickly tell you about what we're doing here today. We are in conversation with Dr. Tilak Ranjan Bera. He's the author of multiple books on Indian travel. And for today's discussion, we are going to be focusing on two particular books of his. The first one is Andaman Islands in Wonderland and Nicobar Islands in Nature's Kingdom. And both are available via Neogi Books. Dr. Bera is based out of Kolkata and he has previously worked as an ophthalmologist. He has published several works on his travels around remote places in India. And in recognition of his works, he was awarded the Fulbright Nehru Fellowship by the United States and India Educational Foundation, during which he attended Yale University. He has also worked as a senior research fellow for the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Thank you, Dr. Vera. Thanks for being here.
thank you. Thank you.
And I'll just quickly tell you about myself. My name is Ayushi Thakur Sinha. I work at the intersection of media, culture, and writing. I'm very grateful to Neogi Books for allowing us this opportunity to interact. Shall we get started? We'll just dive into it. Yeah, sir, how are you doing? How has this year been for you? How are you coping with whatever has been going on around us?
Fortunately, I have completed two very long field trips just before this lockdown. So, and now was the time to
Wow.
compile my experience. So, only thing is, this
Hmm.
is very scary for us that whatever we want to do, we have to finish it off very early. So we were taking our time and we were doing our work at a leisure. Whereas now this has given us a warning that we can't do it anymore. I'm working on my next book, which is
That's very true.
undergoing some
Mhm.
editorial work, mostly online. So I'm quite okay. I mean, in the sense, working most of the time from home only, occasional going out for some
Mm.
essential work, but otherwise,
That's wonderful. I think if you have so much going on, especially in terms of writing and so much research to do, then in a strange way, the lockdown has actually been beneficial in terms of just allowing us that time to, remain focused on what we're doing. So I'm glad that it's been that way for you as well. Um, and now I just want to address the repertoire that you have of travel books. You have a lot of them. You've written a lot extensively, especially on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I mean, you spent around 15 years researching the islands. That is a very devoted endeavor. So would you want to tell us a little bit about how come this interest was generated? How did you decide to publish on the subject?
actually, uh, I was posted to Andaman and Nicobar Islands, that is Port Blair Naval Hospital, for 3 years during
Mm-hmm.
1999 to 2002. So at
Mm-hmm.
that time, I got a wonderful opportunity to explore both the Andaman and Nicobar archipelagos because I was
Wow.
conducting extensive medical camps and which included the remote territories, which otherwise not many people get an opportunity to visit, and interacting with the people also. So
Wow.
it was a wonderful opportunity to know about these two places because unless you it takes quite some time. Andaman is not like any other tourism destination that you come to know about that place in 7 or 10 days. It takes years to know about Andaman, and Nicobar is restricted territory. Nicobar, it
Yeah.
becomes even more difficult to explore Nicobar.
Mm-hmm.
So, though my books may appear that they are pictorial books on some travel destinations, but actually they are the outcome of my extensive research on some subjects related to those places. For example, the Andaman book, we have discussed, we have not stopped. I mean, there are Aboriginal tribes, but
Mm-hmm.
when we discuss about them, can we divide them into several groups like there are two fractions. One is Jarawa Centenary, the other one is. Then you have to go into the depth of that subject, and you have to study what the Britishers wrote, on what basis you are doing that. And there comes, if you are trying to explain that they actually walked into Andaman, then also you have to do a lot of study to come to that
Right.
conclusion. So
Absolutely.
these books have a lot of research material. And then let us say about my other book also on Northeast India. It took me 6-7 years to explore that. It's a very difficult territory.
Of
So
course.
that is even that book also contains archaeology, anthropology, language, culture, apart from physical features. So these books are not casual pictorial books, oblique coffee table books, but it contains a lot of research materials. But of course, I can't discuss all those research subjects in these books much. Like in Andaman, we had to
Sure.
stop somewhere that they walked into it, and they walked into, they are in waves. We had to stop somewhere because this is for everybody. These books are not really for the research scholars. They
Right.
are
Right.
for general readers. So
Mm-hmm.
we had to restrict our discussion to that level. But even
Mm-hmm.
then, it was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And about, you mentioned that 15 years of research. Basically, I'm publishing books on Andaman since 2001. When I was there,
Wow.
my initial books were Bengali books by Ananda
Mm-hmm.
Publisher. Ananda Publisher is the most famous Bengali
Yes,
publisher.
of course. Of course.
So
Yeah.
first, my two of my books were by them, and which are still
Mm-hmm.
continuing. They are regularly reprinting them.
Mm-hmm.
My first English book was by UBS Publishers. So that also was published in 2002, and it also went for several reprints within a few years. But constantly I was publishing because I was studying various subjects of that place. And in every book, we were adding something new. Like in Andaman book, we discussed with a lot of sketch maps about the migration of
Right.
of uh,
Mm-hmm.
original tribes.
Mm-hmm.
So in
Right.
that way, in every book, there is something new.
Of course. Yeah, very much. Yeah.
And then
Um,
I have published about little known territories. You will see my books is on Andaman, Nicobar, Ladakh, Northeast India. These are not very well known territories. So
Absolutely. Mm.
my books must have something new. You know, it is not just a compilation of information. These are the territories about which books are not easily available. They are difficult territories.
That's very true. In fact, this leads us to my next question because, especially your book on the Nicobar Islands, you've mentioned how there is not enough scholarship available on the subject. Was it difficult to obtain information? How was the experience for you? And what was it that was very I mean, why do you think that there is such a lack of scholarship on the Nicobar Islands, apart from the fact that it is a restricted area, but there is so much more to be learned about it.
Firstly, it is restricted area. That restricts
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people to go there even. And next is the accessibility is very poor. If you are going by a
Sure.
ship, you don't get a ship daily there. You know, one ship takes 7 days to come back to port. So if you have
Wow.
got down, let us say at Karnikobar, you will get a ship after 1 week. So it is
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to explore entire Nicobar group of islands in
Mm-hmm.
a short time for anybody. You have to be there for a year or two. And then
Mm-hmm.
the subjects are very, I mean, eventually I understood, in fact, I have divided my Nicobar, the subject into 5 territories. Eventually I realized that these 5 group of islands behave differently. And then let us say the central Nicobar group of island are matriarchal and the
Right.
others are patriarchal. To understand
Mm-hmm.
the thing, firstly, you have to go repeatedly, which not many people can go. And
Of
number two
course.
is you have to interact with the people very intense. You know, as a doctor, I was interacting with them almost daily in a very very close. Yes, I came to know this sort of nuances in the cultural, because you don't read them in any book, because
Right.
nobody actually elaborates that these were actually, there were ranis. You know, the islands were guided by the head woman of the island is a lady. then you
Mm-hmm.
notice that there is some sort of cultural difference with the other islands, whereas
Right.
other islands they're all male.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Mm-hmm.
you notice that, but you don't read about it. So you have to from your own experience you understand. I mean, you analyze what is the difference in this particular group of island, in the central group,
Right.
that is Kamuta, Nankori, Kachal, that group.
Right.
So for
Mm-hmm.
that you have to be there for several years, at least 2 3
Of
years, to
course.
really understand all these things.
Absolutely. It sounds like very intense documentation. Yeah.
So that is why both these places, Andaman is also not that easy, but at least Andaman is accessible. If you
Mm-hmm.
want, you can explore Andaman from this end to that end in 3 4 months, quite thoroughly.
Okay.
Except, of course, some restricted territories, or except knowing much about these Aboriginal tribes, because you won't be permitted to do it. I mean, you have to be in a special situation to really get an opportunity to study them. Yeah, but otherwise, Andaman you can explore,
Mm-hmm.
but it's almost very difficult. So that is why very few good books are there on Nicobar.
Of course. Yeah. And especially, I'm guessing in the wake of the tsunami that happened in 2004, um, I'm not sure if it has changed how restricted the islands are, but you have definitely devoted a lot of chapters to discussing the tsunami and its devastating effects on the island. The question I wanted to ask you is, what do you think in terms of the community there and the stakeholders? How did you see them come together to rebuild the infrastructure or, um, their own sense of community? How was it rebuilt after the tsunami?
Um, Actually, I was posted there from 99 to 2002,
Mm-hmm.
and tsunami occurred in December 2004. So
Mm-hmm.
I saw for the first time in the news, when it was flashed as a news in the TV. I was,
Right.
I mean, I was shocked, because by
Of
then
course.
I was really in love with these two archipelagos. Andaman and Nicobar had become my most favorite place, because I have interacted with them in a very intense manner, in a very close manner.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go there. So I went there several times after tsunami. When I went for the first time, I saw them settled in the temporary rehabilitation sheds. They were temporary
Okay.
shelters with
Okay.
tin roofs and all.
Mm-hmm.
When I went there in 2010, then I saw settling the permanent rehabilitation villages. They were absolutely fantastic. I
Wow.
mean, they can be compared with, I mean, the very nicely arranged cottages, modern cottages arranged in a very nice manner, connected by road, connected with jetty. And that was a wonderful experience. But I saw them jumping 100 years. That was an experience. What I mean by 100 years is, Nicobaris used to live a very primitive life. Hardly
Mm-hmm.
there were any electricity in any villages, and there was barely some road, and some communication was by cycle or walking in the moonlight. Whereas after these rehabilitation shelters were constructed, there were roads all over. I could see, and they got a lot of compensation. So they purchased modern motorcycles, they purchased
Mm-hmm.
cars, TV, fridge, and water supply to their kitchen and to their bathrooms, oblique electric supply. So they had never
Mm.
experienced. So that is what I mean. They jumped almost 100 years in front of my
Okay.
eyes. 4 years.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that I saw the change, because I had seen these places pre-tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
After tsunami, that is 2004, if anybody goes, they will have absolutely no idea how these villages used to be pre-tsunami, because
Right.
they became all the same and quite different. So that
Of
was a
course.
wonderful experience and wonderful
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to record that.
Hmm.
An archipelago or a culture can change to that extent within a short time after a
Of course.
disaster.
Yeah. In fact, that is very telling that, I mean, it's unfortunate that it took a tsunami to thrust them into that, in that position where they had to kind of re-interact with the modern world and learn the ways of how the modern world is now functioning. But it's very interesting to hear that, okay, this is what it took to get them, you know,
Yeah.
eh,
It was
modern
a
facilities.
lifetime
Yeah,
experience for me. In fact, I was
of
after the
course.
anthropologist, they probably missed an opportunity to record anthropologically how a community or how a
Hmm.
fraternity can change so much within a short time. They had to adapt to this
Yeah,
new environment. They had never
absolutely.
experienced this sort of thing. So it must be a difficult thing for them. Of course, very
For
good
sure.
opportunity they got, that they are getting water. For water, they used to go quite far. And for
Hmm.
everything, they used to go to the jetty to buy. Now everything is
Hmm.
coming. They started getting daily bus service to the
Hmm.
marketplace and to that place. Almost
Right.
every village had a small sort of market, which they never. I was shocked. I went there with my son also once, that we could buy, soft drinks from the fridge of the local shop. It was
Wow.
unimaginable. It was absolutely unimaginable just 2 years prior to that. So
Hmm.
I saw the transformation, which was quite an experience to record.
I'm sure. Yeah, from a socio-cultural perspective, it sounds quite a leap that must have happened. I still want to now focus on the kind of photography that you have included in your books. I mean, when I started reading the books, it was very obvious that this is a collection of very impressive photographs, and a lot of them are aerially captured. So, how was it that you managed to curate and collect all these photos? And a lot of these shots look quite difficult. So, how were you able to manage putting this together?
Right from the beginning, my one of the primary aim was to present my country in the best possible manner, in a very colorful manner. And in fact, my country is so beautiful that we also don't know how beautiful is that country. Very few people have seen the beauty of Andaman and Nicobar. I got an
Right.
opportunity, so it was one of my aim that I have to publish pictorial books, because that is one of the wealth which is unparalleled. Even Indians don't know how beautiful is Andaman. And then what happened? I was flying from one place to the other. Photography is one of my passion. Almost since
Okay.
childhood. Here
Hmm.
I had to pick up aerial photography. That's a different subject altogether. When
Yeah.
you're flying from in an aircraft, and then you have to really learn that aerial photography.
Mm-hmm.
So I got an opportunity, so I picked up that, because otherwise I was very enthusiastic about photography.
Mm-hmm.
So I was flying to conduct medical camps from here to there. So that I got an opportunity. So eventually I had a wonderful set of photographs captured during the pre-tsunami period. Very few people has got such a collection. And then after tsunami, when I went, I got another opportunity to collect those. To repeat those aerial photographs from different angle. And then I had a comparative photographs that these islands looked like this pre-tsunami, after tsunami like this. Some island
Wow.
had tilted, some island had submerged. There's an island called Trinket Island. I got an opportunity to record how it actually submerged gradually over a period.
Wow.
Like I went there in 2005, I recorded something. 2007, I recorded that it has gone farther down. There were hardly any trees, and then 2010, I realized it is irretrievable. Whereas
Yeah.
in some other case, some islands were coming up. Even that was very interesting. So I had a series of photographs to document how the geophysiology altered following the tsunami because of the tilting of the ocean plates. So in fact, this
Okay.
set of photographs, these comparative photographs, is extremely rare in the world. You can say very few photographers got an opportunity of recording such an event. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I had a lot of pre-tsunami photographs so that I could compare.
Of course, from a documentation and archival point of view, this sounds like a very important resource for anyone that is interested in the archipelago, for sure. And it is very noticeable that aerial photography is something that you favor and that you had to pick it up, and you've provided a lot of very wonderful aerial photographs in the book. Okay, very quickly, I'm just moving to our next topic of discussion. Uh, so now I'm thinking about in terms of what we've been discussing about the pristine nature and the remoteness of these islands. Um, Tourism is obviously one of their biggest sources of income for the government. Do you think that tourism is something that has affected them ecologically and especially after the tsunami? Do you think that tourism and economy are some things that can go hand in hand? And what do you think is the roadmap for the future for islands like these that are already very prone to a lot of natural factors?
Well, we have to ensure, in the sense, the tourism has to continue there because that is one of the primary
Right.
sources of income for the majority of them.
Yes.
And all over the world, it is not only in India that we are facing this problem. And there are many such ecologically fragile zones where tourism is permitted. So it is possible, provided you follow certain rules. That is, firstly, you restrict the tourists to some extent. And number two is you educate the tourists that they don't do any harm there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can expose them. So it is the the role of the government to formulate the rules, do's and don'ts, and then more important than that is to implement these rules in a very strict manner. So they have to educate the service providers. There are tourist police, so they can implement that. And there is another very useful control mechanism for Andaman particularly, that you cannot go to Andaman in train, bus, motorcycle. So government has total control over how many tourists they want to permit by restricting the number of flights there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the good quality tourists come by flight. So
Mm-hmm.
government during the season time also should restrict the number of flights so that a
Mm-hmm.
certain number of tourists are permitted, which is quite okay to maintain the viability of the place and how many tourists it.
Yeah, a
So
conscious
it is
tourism.
very
Yeah.
very easy for Andaman that nobody can go
Mm-hmm.
there excepting by ship or by flight. So that is one advantage. So the government can easily implement that, and of course, the local people has to behave. Uh, Tourists definitely. The
Mm.
tourists have to they have to be disciplined and follow the rules, and they have to be
Respectful.
penalized in a
Yeah.
manner, not in a
Mm-hmm.
manner. If you do it,
Mm-hmm.
then you have trouble. You will face trouble. So it is possible. That is. And all
Mm.
over the world they are doing. There are many sensitive places ecologically fragile zones where tourism is permitted, but
Definitely.
it
Yeah.
has to be regulated in a very strict manner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you mentioned that the locals also have a role to play in this going forward. The locals are people that you have described in your book as peaceful and having their own peculiar customs. So, do you want to expand on that? Do you have any anecdotes for us that
Yeah.
reflect on the
Actually, both these books are full of anecdotes because you can't
right?
imagine how many interesting things I came to know because by virtue
Mm-hmm.
of my long stay there.
Mm-hmm.
I can vouch for it that I have seen these Nicobaris most useful and very happy-go-lucky type people. Uh, Primarily because they interacted less with the modern people like you and me. We are very
Yeah.
greedy, and there is no end to our desire. They
Yeah.
were not exposed to this sort of if they have something they want more of that, they want this and that, so that was it. So they had adequate food in the form of pandanus and coconut and a lot of fish, so they were satisfied that their basic things are there.
Mm-hmm.
Till tsunami, mind that. Till tsunami, they were not exposed to outsiders. But after tsunami, their attitude changed because they got a lot of money as compensation. And they came to know, a lot of them came to Port Blair. Before that, very few of them had actually left Nicobar Island and gone outside. So their exposure was so less. But after
Mm-hmm.
tsunami, their communication improved. They also started having, I have this, so I must, so and so has that motorcycle, opening that car, I also want to buy. So their attitude changed after tsunami, but I had seen them in a very innocent form prior to tsunami. that was a wonderful experience to
Right.
actually spend some time with them, with such a culture. I mean, such a group of people
Hmm.
who remain in that state of mind.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a wonderful. Yeah. And as far as anecdote is concerned, I would like to tell about a very interesting story of Edward
Yes,
Kuchar.
please.
Edward
Yes.
Kuchar was the chief captain of Car Nicobar Island.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he after Indian independence, Indian Air Force occupied the Car Nicobar airfield,
Mm-hmm.
from Royal Air Force. It was
Okay.
constructed. It was constructed by the Japanese during the Second World War, but Royal Air
Okay.
Force was using it. So Indian government at some stage occupied in Air Force. So they needed a lot of land to expand that. So they approached the local villagers. They said, no, sorry. And Edward Kuchart was the chief captain of Karniku, but they said, no, not because they are not concerned about Indian security, but because they never wanted outsiders to be in their village in good
Mm-hmm.
number. They were very
Mm-hmm.
hesitant to give or invite people to stay with them. So that was their concern. So
Okay.
anyway, they were not getting land for expansion of the airstrip. So Edward Kuchart was invited by government of India during Republic Day parade to Delhi. At that
Mm-hmm.
time, Jawaharlal Nehru got an opportunity to request him, can you give us some more land because it is required for Indian security. So when he heard that, he promptly agreed, okay, we'll give that. But the PMO office had a problem. So they asked him, how much money do you want? He said, money, what is that? In the sense, in Nicobar, the money was not of any use. They still
Okay.
barter system.
Yeah.
So he belonged to that culture. So he said, no money, no money. He had no idea about what should be the exchange value. But they insisted. So they said, he thought for a while and then said, okay, if I have to take something, give me that coat. He pointed towards what Jawaharlal Nehru was wearing. He was wearing a long coat. So he said,
Mm-hmm.
I want that. So the people were damn amused. Okay, fine. But they had to agree that that is what he can think of because he was
Mm.
planning of something which he can take back to Port, I mean, to Nico. So
Right.
he was back that and he was given that. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the end of the deal. That's the first half of the story. It is not
Wow.
ending. And I got involved with the second.
Okay.
When Rajiv Gandhi was landing in the same airfield, he was
Mm.
told, look, this airfield has come up because your grandfather has gifted his coat to Edward Kuchar. So he got damn amused and he wanted to see that coat. After all, it was his grandfather's coat.
Mm-hmm.
So when they opened that, they found it absolutely in tatters in the sense it was eaten by moth because for many years they have never opened it because it was not required there. So
Yeah.
then Rajiv Gandhi presented his quote, which was much shorter in length. So he presented his quote, which they kept as the replacement memento. And then when I heard that story, when I went to Karnikobar next time, I wanted to photograph that. Edward Kuchak was no more. So I took
Mm.
that photograph that his son was holding it. But during tsunami, they lost everything. That entire village was devastated. So when I came to know, I enlarged that photograph and presented that when I went there to the chief captain of Karnikobar, and they kept it in their, community hall. They got
Wow.
they kept it there. So I felt
Yeah.
nice. At least I could revive one of the
Of
one of the
course. Yeah.
memory, and they were
Of
also very
course.
happy with it.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That is a really interesting story. Especially because it's very fascinating to consider that the whole community may be a sort of prehistoric way of life that they're leading, and even things like the barter system. It may have changed now, but these are things that from an anthropological point of view, they're very interesting. Sir, very quickly, the next question focuses on um, the you know how you've mentioned that indigenous tribes are, and I'm quoting from your book actually, are the greatest examples of how the human race remains absolutely static, physically and culturally when they are restricted to a completely isolated physical environment. And this connects with the last question. Can you expand a little bit on this? How do you think they have developed over time, obviously in a more accelerated way in the last 10 years, but how has their engagement been with the so-called mainland and modern ways of life?
Well, this is the first part of the question is,
Hmm.
I mentioned that in relation that, let us say the Aboriginal tribes with Jarawa Onge Centenarians, they had entered the archipelago 30 to 40,000 years. So the way they entered physically and with the cultural knowledge, like they never knew how to light a fire. So that was
Hmm.
40,000 years ago. They got isolated there and they still remained in that state when we discovered them. The Jarawas could not light a fire till that time, till
Wow.
1996. So that is what I meant. If you isolate a human fraternity and
Mm.
let them live in an enclosed territory and they don't interact with anybody else, they remain in that same physical state and in a state of culture. Whereas their brothers who were in the mainland, they interact with people left and right, they change physically also, and they have come like this, like what we
Yeah.
look like today.
Yeah.
And culturally and knowledge wise, like we are interacting in Instagram. So that
Hmm.
is because gradually we have imbibed this and that knowledge and we have changed a lot. Whereas in their case, they remained in the same state because they were isolated.
Absolutely.
They could not interact
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that was
Okay. Now, should we move on to talking about how the relationship of the population of the archipelago has sort of evolved with representatives of the government of India? Do you think that, I mean, especially in terms of the indigenous politics that are now, discussed a lot in terms of, say, the First Nations and Canada or the Maori in New Zealand? How would you place that in that context, the relationship that Andaman and Nicobar residents have with the government of India?
what my personal observation is. The British, as long as they occupied the islands, they have not handled this sensitive issue very carefully. They were not really bothered to because
Yeah.
if you, let me quote from their statistics or data. Both Portman and they have recorded that when and Radcliffe Brown has recorded that when the British established their first permanent penal settlement in 1858, there were 4,000 to 5,000 Great Andamanis.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas their own census conducted by Sir R.C. Tytler in 1901 says that it reduced to 600. Now, in 50 years, 1848 to 1901, in 50 years, their number decreased from 5,000 to 600, 9 times. And
Wow.
in the next 50 years, by the time British was leaving, 1947, their number reduced to 90. So,
90.
19,
Mm.
19. So,
Oh
in
my
the next
God,
50
that's
years, it
huge.
reduced by 30 times from 600 to 90. But the British were presenting papers in England during this
Mm-hmm.
period to establish that they are a very rare breed. They must be protected. They are one of the rare anatomical modern human who has survived this still, and they have still remained in a pure form. So they were fully conscious how important it was to preserve them and to provide them protection. At the same time, during their time, they are drastically reduced.
Right.
There are other
Mm-hmm.
reasons, all right, but there are sometimes we can't even explain what exactly they did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but there are records that they killed them, some of them at the initial period, just like that. So that also they have recorded, and I've quoted that in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas after government of India took over the responsibility, their record is much better. We keep hearing this and that the road passes through that, or because they have to balance. They have to think about other people also. They have to maintain. But overall, the Aboriginal tribes has increased in number during this period. So I would say their record is much.
Okay. 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 Wonderful. Um, so the next question is focused on ecological challenges that you think the location may face in the upcoming years. Do you want to comment on, especially in the age of global warming and many other natural forces that are already that make it very susceptible in any case? What do you think are the biggest
No,
challenges?
I don't think Andaman Nicobar has very special threat. Like
Mm-hmm.
this global warming threat is for the whole world. So they don't
Right,
have any
right.
special threat, except that I don't know how the corals and all their that sort of natural wealth will
Yeah,
adapt to the new environment. They will keep adapting, and nature has wonderful capability to adapt to a new environment.
it does.
So I don't think, and then this Andaman has formed a very well. I mean, they are now in a very balanced state. They know now what to do and what not to do. As I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, they can restrict the tourists and they can teach the tourists what to do and what not.
Yes.
They can
Mm-hmm.
restrict the population there. It's everything is easy because if they don't permit, people cannot enter.
Of
Every
course.
entry of everything is recorded. So
Mm-hmm.
it is possible to restrict things and balance and maintain a balance. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think they have a immediate threat unless they do something very unusual.
Right,
If it's
right.
not natural disaster like that, they are quite
Yeah,
safe. I don't think they have any extra strength. They know how to protect the environment now.
that's good to hear. Um, so do you have any thoughts on their local self-governance and their judicial practices? I mean, you must have witnessed those in action. Do you have any comments or any anecdotes that you can tell us?
Yes, actually, I have written about it because Nicobar had a very primitive culture, quite different from the mainland because they were not in touch with any other culture.
Yeah, yeah.
So they developed their own election. So they
Mm-hmm.
used to elect their first captain, second captain. Even they developed their own method of punishing people. Initially, for minor offense.
Sir, the camera has turned. I think you'll
Yeah,
just have
yeah,
to, yeah.
yeah. For
Yes, all
minor
done.
offense, they used to fine them. You know that you have to pay. All in barter. You have
Mm,
to pay 5 chicken, oblique 1 pig, or 2, or so many coconuts for your offense.
right.
That is how they used to settle. But for major offense and for repeated offenders, there were some habitual offenders. They would create some problem and serious offense repeatedly. For them, they had developed even capital punishment in the sense of some form of execution. But before taking such a decision, they used to consult all the captains repeatedly and even give warning to that chap. If you do it, next time you have difficulty. I mean, this
Mm,
time we are finding you all right, but next time we are not going. So
okay.
I found that quite democratic. Actually, that was
Mm,
uh, that was done what is expected from a community in a primitive culture. That was quite
mm,
good. You know, they did.
right, right. Of course. They must have their own ways of
Yeah, yeah.
understanding justice and, yeah, ethics. Um, Sir, we have to wrap up soon, but I do want to focus a little bit on the archival material that you've used in the books. Some of them date back to like 1688. So my question is that what is the historical perspective in whatever limited scholarship that exists of these islands? Do you think that especially after, the world wars had ended and colonization had ended, do you think it has evolved somehow? And what do you think is the sort of perspective now?
I could not follow your question. What
Um, the anecdotes that you have used in your book, I
no.
wanted to,
Okay, fine. If
yeah,
you
hear
give
a
me
little bit.
with me
Yes.
in short, because probably we
Yeah, yeah,
don't
of
have much
course.
time,
Of
I,
course,
I
yeah.
would like to mention a very interesting anecdote in that sense. Where it occurred in 1996. I landed up there in 1999.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is about a Jarawa boy.
Right.
Now, Jarawas were they live in a particular reserve which is known as Jarawa Reserve, and there are villages for settlers, including Bengali settlers in between. So there
Mm.
is one such village called Kodumtal. It's between
Okay.
two Jarawas.
Mm.
Now, one day, Andaman Port Blair administration got a call that one Jarawa boy has fallen into a ditch while plucking banana, and he is in agony because he has broken his leg. What to do?
Oh,
So they said, okay, fine, just send him to Port Blair in an ambulance. For the first time, a Jarawa was rescued and sent to Port Blair. So now he underwent treatment for a few months, and during that time, he developed nice rapport with the doctors, nurses, and even the anthropologist and the tribal welfare department. So when he recovered, he was sent back there. So that was just an experimental, that
mm-hmm.
what we noticed that after 2 months of that incident, Jarraj, enemy, he called himself enemy. So this incident is known as enemy incident.
Wow.
Now for the first time, after enemy was released, the Jarwas came to the highway without arms, in the sense bow and arrow, indicating that now we want friendship. So they realized, they initially thought they have taken him to kill him or to torture him, but then they realized he got the information from enemy that they have actually treated him very nicely and he has recovered because of that, and that they could see that. So their attitude towards modern people altered. So that is not the only incident of how the attitude the relationship improved, but that's certainly one of the incidents which favored improvement of their attitude, their behavior with the others. So that is very interesting. And
that's wonderful. Yeah, that is very interesting. And the next part of my question was the historical perspective on these islands, especially in terms of the books that have been written about it. Do you think that they have the perspective is the same more or less? I mean, you've gone through pretty much every book that that exists on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, I'm sure. Do you think that the perspective has evolved over time, or is it how they were being written about maybe 200, 300 years ago? Is it pretty much the same even now?
Definitely, the modern people, the change is taking place in the last 20, 30 years. Before that, it was more or less static. In 100 years, there was hardly any change. But the change has taken place in the last 20, 30 years when they got exposed to modern people, and particularly after tsunami, because there was a lot of change, particularly in Nicobar after tsunami. So the tsunami has transformed Nicobar completely.
Okay, that is very interesting. Sir, I can't let you go without discussing the very famous news case that occurred in November 2018, where we read about John Chow, who was an American missionary and adventure blogger who decided to visit the Sentinelese, and he was killed by them in an effort to convert them to Christianity. So what do you say about incidents like these? Like, do you think that firstly, what do you think about the incidents? Do you have any comment on people trying to make contact with a tribe that is so famously uncontacted? And how do you think this tribe got there? How do you think they are there in the first place? That they live there and they have lived there for so many years.
There's no point in repeating the story. First thing is, you have to understand their cultural state. They are in a very primitive state, and they behave in a violent manner, or yet only when anybody intrudes into their territory. Otherwise, they are quite okay within themselves, but they don't like anybody else. So if you feel that you can do whatever you feel like, then that was not a very good idea to begin with. And as far as where from they have come, I had to read a lot to know exactly how we can explain. That is, all these news were coming in the front page of the newspapers, but nobody discussed who are these people and how did they reach there.
Right.
Now, that is one of my study, research. And then in this book also I have discussed in detail that the only possibility is they were actually going on foot. They were reaching there on foot. And during the glacial period, when a land bridge forms between Andaman and the Bengal Myanmar coast. So they were actually, they went in waves. In the previous glacial period, one group went, they are Jarwa and the Sentinelese. And after 25,000 years, during the next glacial period, probably the Great Andaman is entered. And I have explained that with photographs to whatever extent possible for everybody to understand.
That is a very interesting idea. Is that your current research interest as well, to focus on this the glacial period that you just mentioned?
Yes, actually, Andaman and Nicobar has transformed me. As I mentioned, that from an ophthalmologist, I have become Indologist, because I realized a lot of interesting thing has happened in Andaman which we are missing. We are unable to explain, including this, that if they have gone there walking, then a land bridge has to form. Then we have to get into the subject of glacial period, interglacial period. So the thing is that during glacial period, seawater goes down by 150 130 meters or 400 feet. Then only there is a submerged mountain range connecting Andaman with Arakan Yomo range of Burma. Basically, Andaman is the eastern extension of Himalayas. So that is very interesting. But this is not taught in our syllabus, unfortunately.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
Now comes if the sea recedes that much, so then the Bengal coast recedes by about 200 miles, approximately 200 miles. Then a huge landmass forms between Bengal and Myanmar. These are not discussed. So that is why it's tricky. What is this landmass? I'm trying to refer that as Bengal Glacial Coastal Shelf. Who lived? What happened there? When the water started rising during interglacial period, where did they go? That water displaced them, so they must have resettled themselves somewhere. The entire thing remains quite undiscussed, even not conceived by many that some such phenomena may have taken place in the past in India. So that is where I am drawn into over the years. Now that has become my subject.
Yeah. I mean, to hear that they could possibly be an extension of the Himalayas, that is really that's not discussed at all.
Because
I
you
think
can
even the
explain it in
audience.
any other way. You have to discuss about glacial period and then forming a land bridge, and they could have primitive people 40,000 years back have not flown by spice jet, or that they have not gone to Nicobar. They could reach that place only if it were accessible to them.
Of course.
They have moved into it. There is no other. Whereas we don't discuss that. I mean, that is not in our syllabus as it. So that is, but it drew me into that. You can't avoid thinking it. You have to explain.
Absolutely.
Then comes about this Bengal. So we have to break these undiscussed issues to understand the pre-recorded past of India.
Sure. Yeah. And this is just going back to the very basics of almost like evolution in that region. I mean, this is very interesting. So do you have any books that you would want to recommend for any further reading if anyone is interested on the subject?
I have not gone through the recent books, but I can recommend if anybody is seriously interested to know. But very interesting things are recorded in C. Bodenclaus's book called In the Andaman and Nicobars. They explored Bodenclaus and Sir William Abbott. They explored Andaman and Nicobar quite extensively in 1899, and this book was published in 1901 from England. Thoroughly, they have explained exactly what they saw in each Andaman Island, in each Nicobar Island. That was fantastic. In fact, I got some information from the preface of that book that they had actually preserved the collection of whatever biological specimens and ethnographic specimens in Washington Museum at that time. So when I was at Yale University, I wrote to Smithsonian. The Washington University Museum has become part of Smithsonian Institute. I wrote to them and they were damn happy to invite me. And the curator himself conducted me and shown me everything about they had collected 100 years back in Nicobar. That was a wonderful opportunity. So I can recommend only that book because that is got very authentic record of 100 years ago. And then in my book, we have recorded everything possible thereafter up to 2010.
Of course. Yeah. I think for anyone just beginning to get interested in the islands, this would be a very good starting point. Okay, sir, I think we're almost done. I just wanted to ask if you have anything new going on, if there are any other books that you would want to tell us about on this subject. And we could also take some questions from the audience very quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I think we are already late. You can take the questions.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I don't have.
It took a few minutes to start, but if the audience wants to ask anything, that would be great. Let's just give them a second. I was thinking, sir, maybe we should write down the name of the book that you mentioned in the comments, and I can just pin it so that people have a reference.
See, you see in the book also, in the further reading section of these books, I've mentioned this Bodenclaus book. This Bodenclaus book is mentioned in the further reading. In fact, there are many books mentioned, but if you ask me to suggest one book, I will suggest this because this book gives some very interesting information.
Okay, 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 wonderful. I don't see any questions so far, so I think we can just give it another few seconds and then we can wrap up. But this was a very enlightening discussion, sir. Thank you so much. I mean, just reading the books itself, um, they were, they really altered my perspective on this region. And there is something very magical to read about a community that is, somehow just outside the structures that we live in. It's quite something to read about. I think we have a question from Mankaroni. What kind of sources did he depend on for research, and was it primary or secondary as well?
Well, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
an issue like how the Aboriginal tribes of Andaman has entered Andaman is not commonly discussed. No, not
Mm-hmm.
even the scholars also don't share with you. Whereas
Right.
when you go to Andaman, you find that they are there. They are there, and you go through the anthropological record. You can decide. I mean, you can make out that they can be divided into two groups. That is what the Britishers. For the 100 years, we know that they can be divided into two groups, but we are not explaining how. Have they originated there? Have they evolved there? No. Have they were airdropped there? No. Have they gone by ship? No. Have they gone by aircraft? No. And you
Mm.
come up with a scientific explanation. And then you have to think. I mean, when I was at Yale, I was attending an environment lecture series, and we had discussed with the professors also that glacial period, what happens during glacial period and the water. But somehow it is not a very common subject in our syllabus. So we have no clue
Sure.
about it. But
Yeah.
when you apply that glacial and interglacial period phenomena here, you actually can make out that actually this land bridge forms between Andaman and Niue during glacial period when the water goes down because the submerged land. In fact, if you go to Andaman and you see that it is actually a hilly terrain, so it is nothing
Mm.
but the humps or the backside of the mountain range, or the top end of the mountain range still remains above water. So that is what you
Okay.
can see, and the rest is
Okay.
underwater. So
Okay.
the mountains are not ending there; it is going down, and the period which remains under sea, submerged
Mm-hmm.
portion,
Mm-hmm.
that you can see from the hydrographic maps.
Mm-hmm.
There are sailing maps, ship. They know what is the depths at some place so that they don't touch the bottom. So they know
Yeah.
that you can make out that the underwater range is continuing. And then you
Okay.
have to read what happens to the coastal contour during glacial time. You will see the
Mm.
coast actually recedes a lot. When you see
Yeah.
that the coast recedes, then you can see that Andaman actually physically gets captured. So there is
Okay.
no straight away available research material because these are the subjects which unfortunately we don't discuss. It is not
Of
very,
course.
let us say, in internet or Wikipedia. So
Right.
but you have to explain.
Mm.
These are something you can see. You can
Mm.
see them that they are empty M31 and 32 empty DNA haplogroup. So that indicates that they dissociated from the mainland 30 to 40,000 years ago. These are
Mm-hmm.
genetic data. So you have to compile all these data and then come up with an explanation. And that is how I have discussed in this book. Whether anybody else is discussing or not, this can be the only plausible
Mm-hmm.
explanation for what has happened. And I have consulted
Right.
the anthropologist,
Of
anthropological.
course.
I'm presenting it like this. They said, yes, it is quite a
Okay.
viable
Okay.
theory. I mean,
Okay. That's
that is my way of approaching it.
okay. Very interesting. Sir, one more question. Rajeshwari Kishore is asking, uh, the government should encourage locals to build Nicobarese huts again. Do you agree with this line of thought?
Government should encourage
The
Nicobarese.
locals to build, I'm guessing Nicobarese hut in the traditional style of construction
Yes,
that,
yes.
yeah.
Actually, I also personally feel
Mm-hmm.
these are our tradition. These are our heritage. So, well,
Mm-hmm.
we are now living in modern huts, all right. But if a family, in fact, after the government constructed modern huts, I have seen some of the local families still constructing those modern. I
Right.
mean, those traditional huts. thrilled. I captured that and I've published that in the photography. Look, they have been provided with very modern gear, but still they prefer to live. And why not? This is something, the heritage, like the huts of our villages. Yes, today we have money to construct a concrete house, but if there are some people who prefer to live in the hut, what is the problem? After all, that is our heritage, that is our culture. So if somebody makes a comfortable hut, let him live there. What is wrong with that? So there also, I prefer that if somebody is interested to making, even with the help of government huts or with our help, that I want to make a traditional hut, you must. Because we must know what were their original structure. Where did they live originally? Even as a specimen, they should make it even in Port Blair also, so that you don't have to go to Port Blair. You don't have to go to Nicobar to see. Even in Port Blair also, they should make a model hut at least. So this is because I have seen. I got an opportunity in Nicobar to see. It was a very unique structure, very unique structure. But we had no idea because not many people are going to Nicobars. So we can make them even in cities. Why not? As a model hut. This is what is Nicobari hut.
As a representative symbol of what they are doing. Sir, one last question, and then I think we can end the session. Suhasini is asking, as residents of the mainland, do we have similarities culturally or genetically with the people? I mean, genetically, of course, but culturally, what are the similarities that exist? And
as I have mentioned, in Andaman and Nicobar, they belong to different period. You know, so Aboriginal tribes of Andaman, they have two groups, one 40,000 years ago, and so you may not have much of genetic similarity with them because they have genes of 40,000 years ago anatomical model. So you have shifted quite a lot from there. Whereas with Nicobaris, you may find actually Nicobaris are non-Khmer speaking. That is from Tibeto-Mongolite tribe, which had entered there from Sumatra. So they will have more of genetic similarity with the Sumatra. You know, so you may not have as far as culture is concerned. But one very interesting thing in these books because I have extensively explored, I have found a lot of Sanskrit words in the Nicobari language. You know, and Loha, Dab, and then some of the names, Minakshi, a very typical Indian name. So I have noted that, and I am using that in my present research. What does that mean? That they were connected by land and by sea with so and so place. That this indicates that where from they got these words. You know, So definitely indicates that some connectivity in the past.
That's very true.
You have to read them. I've covered many subjects. When you read, you'll come to know. And that is how these books are a little different from any other books written about Andaman and Nicobar, because it is long-term in-depth study.
Yeah. Sir, I think we only have 30 seconds left. So this was very interesting. Thank you so much. I'm sure there are so many topics left to discuss, and maybe there will be more the next time we chat. But thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone who joined us here. Thank you to Niyogi Books for letting us do this. Sir, I hope we can chat again soon and hope to read more from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all the viewers. Really, I enjoyed discussing because this is something I love. I mean, this Andaman is my favorite place. And I get a little excited when we talk about it.